Welcome to the show. I am the self-proclaimed tactical historian, and on this show, we like to talk about those men and women who are serving in some of the most dangerous occupations, be it a beat in New York City or overseas as an infantryman in our army. So, we span and everything in between. So it's great to talk about those guys, but also when you talk about those guys and gals, you got to talk about their gear. And one of those most overlooked, I'd say, pieces of equipment has got to be holsters. And that's why I have Mike Barham, is how you say it?
Yeah,
Mike Barham with me today. He is the media and PR manager at Galco Holsters. He's been with them for 18 years, and he's also a graduate of the Army's Infantry, Airborne, and Armorers schools. And he deployed in Afghanistan with the Arizona Army National Guard, 2007, 2008. And he has done all those tactical classes. So he's definitely more of a tactical guru than I will ever be. But it's awesome to have you on the show and to talk about the importance of holsters and talk about some of the holsters that Galco produces, because I carry a Galco and I'm a big fan of the brand. So thank you for coming on.
Yeah, Paul, thanks very much for having me. It's great to be able to talk to you.
So, let's start from the beginning. When did Galco really get its start?
Okay, well, it's kind of a long history, but I'll try to give you the short version here. Galco was founded in 1969 in Chicago, Illinois, by a man named Richard Gallagher. And Mr. Gallagher actually remains the president of the company. He occupies not so much a corner office at Galco, but he does come in and do some custom work and things like that, even at his age. And he absolutely loves working with leather. He always has, and that's why he founded what was originally the famous Jackass Leather Company back in Chicago over 50 years ago. And it's kind of a funny story, the way things started. He was working in leather, and back then, it was the late 1960s, and you had the hippie movement and all that. And hippies like to wear leather stuff. They wear bracelets and fringe jackets and leather pants and whatever else. And Mr. Gallagher had a shop in Chicago making all those things. So one day, a Chicago police officer walks in and asks if Mr. Gallagher could make a holster for him. And Mr. Gallagher had never made a holster, and this particular officer wanted a shoulder holster. So Mr. Gallagher said, yeah, come back in a few weeks and we'll see what I can come up with. So he did a bunch of research. Now, of course, this was way back before there was the internet. So he had to go to the public library and read these books and order these books and things like this. But what he eventually came up with was a horizontal shoulder holster for this police officer. And this apparently really struck a chord with the police officers in that area, because once that police officer started showing that holster around, suddenly Mr. Gallagher had a line down the street of Chicago police officers who wanted to buy a shoulder holster just like this. And he thought, well, okay, this is great. Maybe I'll stop making stuff for the hippies and go full time into making holsters for police officers. Now, there wasn't so much of a ability to carry concealed for armed citizens back then. So his primary market at that time was law enforcement. Fast forward several years, he's extremely successful, but it turns out that the name Jackass was not the greatest choice. This was a little bit before there was political correctness, but the way Mr. Gallagher tells the story is that he'd answer the phone and say, Jackass, and some people would get offended. So after this happened multiple times, he decided he was going to need another name for his company. So in 1980, he called it Galco. He just changed the name of the company. Everything else remained the same, but he changed the name of the company to Galco. Now, a lot of people think that means Gallagher Company, but I assure you, I've known Mr. Gallagher for nearly 20 years. He's nowhere near that self-centered. What it actually means is the Great American Leather Company, and it's just an acronym for that. And just coincidentally, Gallagher Company, and people make that association, but it's really not accurate. In 1983, he decided to move the company to Phoenix, and he did that for multiple reasons. But the climate for guns and things like that in Chicago, as we all know, is worse now than it was then, but it was getting pretty bad even by the 1980s. And beyond that, holster manufacturing, particularly in leather, works better in certain climates. And climate in Phoenix is very, very dry. And what this allows is for holsters to dry faster. When you use the wet molding process, when you rub layers of oil on them and things like that, they need drying time. And the more humid your climate is, the more drying time your holsters take. But in a very, very arid climate like Phoenix, which I'm sure everybody knows is smack in the middle of the Sonoran Desert, the drying time is much quicker. So it actually allowed Mr. Gallagher and the company, which had grown quite a bit by then, to be able to produce holsters at a faster speed to better fill demand. Then, very shortly after that, a little thing came along called Miami Vice. And the hero of the story, Sonny Crockett, played by Don Johnson, the prop master and the director wanted something very, very dramatic for this guy to wear as a holster. And the prop master had worked previously on another movie called Thief, where he had used a jackass holster rig on one of the relatively minor characters. But he ran this idea past the director. Director loved it. The prop master went to find Jackass. Lo and behold, there's no Jackass anymore because Jackass had become Galco and moved out of Chicago. So they went to a local holster maker who kind of rigged up something, and Don Johnson absolutely hated the thing. And so the prop master searched and searched and searched. And again, this was back before the internet, so this was a lot more difficult. And finally, he figured out that Galco had been Jackass, and he called Galco, and Mr. Gallagher actually flew to Miami personally to fit Don Johnson with a shoulder rig for the show. And that shoulder rig went on to become what we like to call a minor character on Miami Vice for the next 7 seasons. And those things still remain sort of a flagship in the Galco line. And here's sort of the modernized version of what Don Johnson wore all those many years ago on Miami Vice. It's been onward and upward since then. Galco's had continued success, which we're very, very grateful for. We have a wonderful, loyal customer base. And as you're of course aware, so many states have now gone to shall issue type concealed carry that the market has broadened tremendously for concealed carry holsters in particular. And that's really our specialty. About 90–95% of the holsters that we sell are designed for concealed carry, whether that's for an armed citizen or a law enforcement officer.
Miami Vice, great documentary. I think that's a great
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Very accurate. I love it. But that's great. And you guys have been, obviously the company's been doing this for so many years. So I have to ask the big question: what makes a good holster? I mean, what characteristics do you expect, or what you should look at when you see a holster and okay, this is going to be a good holster? What do you look for?
Well, first, what you have to really define is, what are you going to do with the holster? What's it for? Now, I'm going to assume we're talking about concealed carry here because you're talking to me. And like I said, 95% of Galco's holsters are for concealed carry. We do offer some holsters for outdoorsmen and things like that. But yeah, let's talk about concealed carry that are going to make that you really want to look for. Okay, this is a leather holster, but a lot of these things are going to apply to a Kydex holster as well. Obviously, quality of construction. Now, you talked about your Galco holster and how happy you've been with it. Detailed molding is important, especially in an open top holster, because that is going to be a lot of what retains the gun. You want to look for things like double stitch seams. That's very important. Look for finished edges. I see a lot of our competitors' holsters that might otherwise be pretty awesome, high quality holsters, but they spent really no time finishing the edges. And that really does, it is not purely a functional thing, but it does add to the quality level of the holster. In terms of practicality, what you want to look for in a concealment holster, again, is something that holds the gun in close to your body. Obviously, especially if you're carrying a big gun like the Smith & Wesson M&P, you want it to suck the gun into your body, keep it tight to your body, so you don't have to wear extremely baggy clothes, although you still got to dress around the gun. One thing that is very, very often overlooked when it comes to holster selection is something we used to call a combat grip. It's now referred to as a firing grip, but you should be able to get a full firing grip on the gun when it's in the holster. And that means you'll usually see some of the leather or kydex that's going to be cut away right here at the base of the trigger guard. And that allows you to wrap your middle finger right around there and again, get a full firing grip on the gun. And that means that when you draw the gun, you don't have to readjust your grip as you're coming out of the holster. So the grip that you have on the gun in the holster is the same as the grip you have here. So that, again, is something that's very, very often overlooked when it comes to holster design, holster construction, and when people are shopping for holsters. So I can't really emphasize that part too much. Look for that combat grip. A lot of the other things are going to be negotiable. Some people prefer an open top holster like this. Some people prefer a retention strap, and that's okay. They're both okay. We sell a lot of both of them. And again, that's just personal preference. But again, we talked about quality construction. We talked about a holster pulling the gun into your side or wherever you're carrying it. Maybe it's at your appendix or something like that. And again, the importance of that full firing grip.
Well, yeah, I will just repeat, when we were talking off camera, one thing I loved about my Galco holster is I think the leather has stood up for like over 3 years now. I've had this holster and it's lasted. I don't see any signs of it wearing down. I don't see, like I've seen in a lot of other leather holsters, sort of the shape of it, slowly just crumpling. No, it's retained its shape. It's retained, it's the retention is great on it. It's fantastic. And the leather is great. So that's why I love my Galco. One thing
go ahead. You mentioned retention, and I talked a little bit about retention straps and things like that. But even your open top holster should be able to hold the gun when you invert it. Now, I'm not saying shake it or anything like that, but it should be able to hold your gun when you invert it. And again, that goes back to some of your detailed molding and things like that. And in terms of quality of construction, I think I mentioned that we do seek out the top 2% of leather available to us in the country for our premium steer hide holsters. So when you buy Galco, you can be pretty much guaranteed to get some of the best leather available to anyone in this country. And we do try to source as much as we can from the United States. We do get our horse hide from overseas. Typically, we don't eat horses generally here in the States, but they love to eat them in Europe, evidently, and we get to buy the hides from them. So that's pretty awesome. And to talk a little bit, you mentioned you had your holster for a couple of years. And what we expect in terms of service life from, say, one of our premium professional grade types of holsters is we expect about a good 10-year service life from something like this. Now, we do have some more entry-level type holsters, and we don't expect a full 10 years from them. We expect maybe half that. But with a holster like yours or a holster like this, that's a little bit more of a premium product, yeah, you can fully expect it to last about 10 years, as long as you maintain it properly. And we can get to maintenance a little later, but yeah, that's what you should expect from your holster.
Fantastic. And of course, one thing I got to ask you, since I have you on here, being in law enforcement, I think the holster that gets introduced to law enforcement officers right away is the so-called pancake holster. I hear it all the time, the pancake leather holster. And, everyone just says, if you're going to buy a holster, go to the gun store, buy a pancake, buy a pancake. What is that design? Where does that come from? How did that originate? And why is it still popular today? Why does everyone buy a pancake?
Well, there's a little bit of history behind that. Now, the pancake holster was originally designed and patented in the 1960s by a guy named Roy Baker. And he had a company called, I want to say it was just Baker Leather, but his whole thing was he had designed the pancake holster, which is a pretty catchy name for a holster, really. And what you have when you have a pancake holster is two pieces of leather that are exactly the same size, that are pressed and stitched together. And then the molding is done on both sides of the holster. You have always on a pancake holster, belt slots fore and aft of the gun. Okay, and what this does, and this is part of the reason pancake holsters became so popular, is that it distributes the weight on your belt a lot better. So you have this wide piece of real estate and the belt running through there, and it just distributes the weight a lot better than just having a single, say, a tunnel loop on the back of the holster that's putting all the pressure and weight of the gun onto that little skinny section of your belt. But here, now you've got these things that are 4 or 5 inches apart, and they're doing a much better job of distributing the weight of a gun. So Roy Baker had this patent, and nobody could really make holsters exactly like this back then. But Mr. Gallagher came up with an improvement on that design. And we see this holster. This is called the concealable, and this came out in the early 1970s. And what Mr. Gallagher did, which is pretty smart, he took that basic layout with the widely spaced belt slots, right? And you see the molding and all that. But what Mr. Gallagher did was use 2 pieces of leather that are not the same size. So what he did was take a smaller piece of leather on the back, a larger piece of leather on the front. And what this allowed him to do was to put all the molding for the gun on the front of the holster, or the forward side of the holster. And this means that the back, the part that rides against your body, is flat. And this is more comfortable than the traditional pancake design, which has all that molding, the shape of the gun basically, pressing up against your body. Instead, you have this smooth surface that your body kind of glides against as you move, rather than all the molding for the shape of the gun. And he called this forward molding. And this is definitely a step forward in terms of holster design. Again, basic pancake, but he made it better. And necessity is often the mother of invention, and getting around patents has, produced some cool things. We still do make pancake holsters. They're very popular. And the reason we still make them, quite honestly, is that a forward molded holster like the one I showed you is a little bit more expensive to produce than a true pancake holster. There's some more handwork that goes into it. And because of that, it is a little bit more expensive. We obviously have to pass those costs on to the end user. And some people just would prefer to spend a little bit less money and buy a true pancake holster, which is still a solid choice, by the way. This is our Combat Master, and this is one of my absolute favorite holsters in our whole line. I got one here for my trusty M&P.
That's
That
great.
answer your question?
Oh yeah, that's great. But of course, being the tactical historian, you can imagine that I love leather. I think leather holsters are great. I know you've done a bunch of really cool training, so I don't know how you feel about leather holsters.
Oh, I love that Combat Master. Didn't I mention
well,
that?
yeah, see, there you go. But I know I often get into, arguments in the muster room when people are trying to sell me on Kydex, and I tell them, plain and simple, John Wayne never wore Kydex. So I don't understand why anyone would wear Kydex. But could you explain the differences between leather and Kydex and the, benefits of the two?
Sure, absolutely. Okay, so Kydex has been around actually for a very long time. The way Kydex actually got its start, and as a student of history, this might interest you. Kydex actually started as a liner for the walls of clean rooms because it doesn't hold a lot of static. And so it ended up as just literally the walls of computer clean rooms and things like that. Somewhere along the line, somebody had the bright idea, because it's so bendable and malleable without cracking, that you can make a holster out of it. Galco actually got in on that trend very early. Back in the middle 1990s. And back then, it was actually very hard to sell Kydex holsters. And despite Galco's best efforts back then, they just weren't selling. But of course, trends come and they go, and trends come back around and things like that. And now Kydex holsters are extremely popular. So Kydex and leather are obviously very different versus your very nice soft leather. But with Kydex, comfort. Now, when I carry any holster pressed up tight against my body, I prefer a leather holster. It's leather will conform to your body over time, which I really like. And it's just like a little bit of a soft layer of padding between the steel and plastic of the gun and my, admittedly expanding love handles. Kydex doesn't give you that flexibility, that give. I mean, Kydex is a hard material, and having this pressed up against your body, you might as well have this plastic and the steel of your pistol pressed up against your body. So in my mind, Kydex is not quite as comfortable as leather. Opinions vary, but for me, that's how that works. And for a lot of the people I've talked to, and I talk to a lot of people when I go to trade shows, whether that's SHOT or NRA or USCCA or any of a bunch of others. And which doesn't mean that Kydex is a poor choice for comfort. It's just, for a lot of people, it's not going to be quite as comfortable as a broken in leather holster. Maintenance. Kydex is virtually maintenance free. You can get this thing wet, you can get it filthy, it doesn't matter. You just brush it off with a cloth or maybe a very soft bristle brush. You can get rid of all that. It's impervious to sweat. It's awesome in that way. Leather does require some more care. Now, leather can easily be cleaned. I'm sure you've heard of saddle soap since you mentioned John Wayne earlier. But we offer cleaners and conditioners, and you can buy them over the counter at Walmart and things like that. But you do need to maintain your leather. You need to clean it. And more importantly, you need to occasionally moisturize it. And a lot of that frequency will depend on where you live. Now, in Arizona, it's very, very dry. So you got to stay on top of moisturizing your holster, or it's going to dry out. Now, if I lived in Galveston, I wouldn't have to worry about it nearly as much, or any other humid climate. But again, the drier the climate you live in, the more you got to stay on top of your maintenance, especially with moisturizing the leather. You don't moisturize the leather, it dries out, it cracks, it doesn't hold your gun as well, and eventually it will fail. So that is something you got to stay on top of. Speed, let's talk about that. A lot of people feel that a leather holster is not going to be as fast on the draw as a Kydex holster. A lot of that's going to depend on your skill level. And if there is a difference in speed, it's going to be measured in milliseconds if you're a well-trained shooter. I have divided my time at various upper level training classes between using a leather holster and a Kydex holster. And quite frankly, I cannot really tell the difference in speed. However, my name is not Max Michel. I am not a world champion speed shooter. I'm just an old fat slow guy. So speed, most people will probably find Kydex very, very slightly faster. But again, that difference, certainly for the vast majority of gun carriers, is going to be measured literally in milliseconds rather than even tenths of a second. The last thing I want to talk about is break-in. A leather holster, new out of the box, is very probably going to need to be broken in. Now, this is not a big deal. You can do this in under 20 minutes if you know what you're doing. It's very easy. We use a process called blocking, where essentially you take the gun, wrap it up in a kitchen storage bag, stuff it back into the holster, walk away for 15 or 20 minutes, come back, take the gun out of the bag, and you're probably going to have a really nice custom fit to your leather holster. If you'd rather not do that, however, I just pulled this out of the box 20 minutes ago. Right? So if you're not interested in breaking in your leather holster, and that's cool with me, yeah, get one of these.
Well, I think another element you have to talk about is I think the leather holster definitely looks better, doesn't it? No.
Oh, I think it does, but then again, we live in this world where, some very techie people think that, this is a much more handsome holster. Than,
right. Yeah.
This beautiful piece of leather. But hey, there's no accounting for taste, and, you like what you like.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. And, if you're going to be carrying it, buy the holster that you're going to like to carry with, right? And,
exactly. And that just means you'll carry it more often, which is really Galco's end goal. Carry your gun.
Absolutely. And, that's a nice transition to the next question, which is, okay, I'm a new gun owner. I went to the store. I just bought my Glock. I'm all excited. What holster am I looking at to get? I mean, it's definitely a Galco, but from there.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to take back just about half of what I just said. But, and I've done a lot of upper level training, and I have an M&P here and not a Glock. Sorry if that offends you, Paul. I'm all about buying American, Yeah. Anyway, what I honestly would recommend, I've taken a lot of higher level training. I've talked to thousands and thousands and thousands of people about this. I've been doing this for 20 years professionally and 35 years as a hobby. But here's the thing. If you just bought your gun, whether that's a Glock or anything else, what you should really be thinking about is getting training. And when you show up at training, probably the easiest thing to use is a strong side belt holster made of Kydex. Now, you may move on to something else later on, but to ease your learning curve, this is probably the simplest, easiest thing to do that's going to help you, because you don't want your mind on your equipment or anything like that, right? You want your mind on what the instructor's saying and working on your skills, working on watching your front sight, perfecting your trigger press, all those things, even just being safe, returning to the holster. The less you minimize all those things with your equipment, the better off you're going to be. And the more you can listen to your instructor, the more you can concentrate on your training. And so for a brand new shooter, just got their gun, hopefully they're going to training, a strong side belt holster worn outside the pants and made of Kydex is actually probably going to be the first choice for that particular instance. Again, you may move on to a leather holster, you may move on to an IWB or a shoulder holster or whatever, but for the beginner, this is absolutely what I would recommend.
Oh, absolutely. I agree with the training sentiment. I've had this conversation with people where I put it as, I sit down with them and I go, all right, we all like to talk about it. We all joke around on the zombie apocalypse, right?
Right.
What firearm are you choosing to survive the zombie apocalypse? And, I'll get someone tell me, oh, well, I'm going to pick something from the AK family because, those are always reliable. And, you can throw them in a swamp, pick them back up and they'll always fire. And I go, cool. Do you know how to take apart and clean and do the maintenance? And do you know how to shoot it? And if it jams, how to, do you know all of that? Well, no, I'm just saying.
These don't jam, man. They don't.
Well,
jam.
yeah, they don't jam, right? Of course. So when I tell them, I'm like, well, yeah, exactly. If the, I don't know, Glock platform, or if the AR platform, it's better you choose the platform, right? You should always get the training and learn, that's the key thing, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, I was 11 years in the Army. Can you see what's back there?
Oh, yeah. Great.
Yeah.
Love it.
Yeah.
So it's always the training. But speaking about training, I have noticed that some of your holsters have room for maybe an extra mag.
Yeah.
So why would somebody want to carry an extra mag on them at all times?
We definitely advocate carrying at least one spare magazine, as do most instructors and things like that. And that's for a couple of reasons. First of all, the possibility that you may face multiple opponents we all saw what happened last summer, right? With these protests that sometimes became riots in the major cities and things like this. It really does behoove you to have some extra ammo just in case you face multiple opponents. Now, the worst thing that you can have happen to you probably if you're in a fight for your life, right, is to see this. Because this means one of two things, right? It means either you've shot your gun to slide lock, which is not good, or it means you've suffered a malfunction. In both of those instances, whether you've run the gun dry or you have a serious malfunction, the answer is your trusty spare magazine. Whether that is, again, you've run the gun dry, you're going to reach, you're going to reload your gun, you're going to and get right back into the fight, right? Or you're going to rip out that dud of a magazine, clear your position 3 malfunction, and again, come right back, get yourself back into the fight. So for those two reasons, running out of ammo, which again, okay, I've got my 16 shot M&P here, right? Chances of me running out of ammo, probably not very high, but if I get caught up in a situation again, like we saw last summer, or as occasionally happens, and sometimes you get a little rattled when you're fighting for your life. You might actually miss, I'm pretty awesome on the range, but when I get scared, I don't shoot quite as well. So again, clearing malfunctions, reloading from slide lock, those are the two most important reasons to carry a spare mag. Most of your malfunctions, major malfunctions in an auto, are going to be related to the magazine anyway. So get rid of that magazine that's a dud, reload with another good spare mag, and just stay in the fight. We offer holsters that carry the magazine attached to the holster itself, and we also carry magazines to position the mag somewhere on your belt. Or if you're carrying in a shoulder holster, you can carry 2 mags on your offside, which actually helps to balance out the weight of the gun, by the way, on a shoulder holster. But yeah, we do advocate carrying a spare mag. We think it's very important to be able to do so, and we encourage everybody to do it.
Fantastic. I mean, you've already spoken about, the shoulder holster. Can we get more into that? I'd like to know about like the different ways you can carry a firearm and the different holsters you have for that. So like inside the waistband, outside the waistband. I know people, on the ankle, people have heard these terms before. What exactly do they mean?
Sure. So let's start out with a belt or a outside the waistband holster. And here, I'm gonna change it up here and use this belt slide type holster. This is our tack slide. But what you've got here is a very simple design. It rides on the outside of your belt, so OWB or belt holster. And the advantages of a belt holster, and whether that's on your hip or behind your hip or anything like that, is one big advantage is going to be comfort, because you're not sharing the inside of your waistband with the gun, right? It's sitting on the outside of your pants, and it's going to be very comfortable. It's also a very fast way to draw your gun, because you don't have to, especially if you're like me, dig your thumb in, near your love handle and all that to get a firing grip on the gun. And we talked about the importance of that firing grip when it comes to drawing and shooting effectively. So a lot of the advantages of the OWB or belt holster is going to be the comfort and the speed with which you can get the gun into action. We move on to an inside the waistband holster, or an IWB. And this is our Horsehide Royal Guard. Now, these are awesome holsters, because now when I put this down in my pants, everything from here on down is concealed. This allows me to wear a shorter concealing garment than I'm able to with a belt holster, because all that's hidden and not sticking down from my belt line, right? The disadvantage of the IWB design is that you're now sharing your pants with this much bulk, okay? So there are ways to get around that. I have carried IWB literally since I started carrying a gun when I was 23 years old. And that was a really long time ago. But I've always been very, very happy with IWB carry. But one of the tricks is to buy your belt and your pants an inch or two larger than you normally would. So let's say you're a 34 and you're just getting started into IWB carry, and you're going to go buy yourself a new pair of jeans. Try a 36. And then you're going to be a lot more comfortable carrying this gun inside your waistband. Now, inside the waistband holsters are typically going to be a little bit slower than a belt holster carried in the same spot on your body. But like we talked about with Kydex versus leather holsters, it's going to be, again, a matter of milliseconds. I have taken courses at Gunsight with belt holsters, and I have taken courses with other trainers like Chuck Taylor, where I wore an inside the waistband holster very similar to this. My times were very, very close. Again, not measured in tenths of seconds, but less than that. Now, speed is important. You have to be able to get your gun into action quickly in a dangerous situation, obviously. But all holsters are compromises, and an inside the waistband holster offering you more concealment may outweigh those little bits of a second in terms of speed. So let's transition a little bit and talk about ankle holsters. Here we have our ankle glove with my trusty Smith & Wesson M&P Compact. Now, ankle holsters are obviously a pretty radical departure from the other holsters we just talked about, whether that's OWB or IWB. Since you're going to carry it as far down on your body as you possibly can, it's going to be far away from you. That said, it's a very concealable way to carry a gun, unless you're wearing shorts or maybe, you like skinny jeans. I don't know what kind of jeans you like, Paul. But anyway, this is a great solution for concealment. Nobody goes around looking at other people's feet, right? Unless you got like a shoe fetish or something. So people aren't conditioned to looking at your feet. People looking for guns, they're looking at your waistline, not at your leg. So this is a really good way to hide a gun. Now, of course, you're going to be limited in terms of the size of the gun. I can carry a full-size gun behind my hip without any trouble at all, but I can't put that full-size M&P down on my ankle, right? Well, I mean, I could, but I'd be walking like Quasimodo. But The concealment advantages here are really big, and it's awesome. I have carried a gun as big as a Glock 26. I actually, because I sell holsters for a living, I thought I should really know about ankle holsters. So I wore a Glock 26 in an ankle holster for a whole year, just so I'd be able to talk about it intelligently. And, you know, after the first week, maybe 2 weeks, didn't even notice it anymore. Now, those first 2 weeks, you're going to notice it. You know, you got an extra, you know, pound and a half on your ankle. You will notice that, but eventually it goes away. Now, one of the great advantages of ankle carry is how awesome it is when you're seated. So if you think about when maybe you've got a desk job, maybe you have a long commute, you know, maybe you're a long distance truck driver, I don't know, but you're seated a lot. Now, a belt holster, especially one carried behind your hip, if you're in a seated position, you've got to lean forward, you've got to dig your hand in to get the gun out, right? If you're carrying in an ankle holster, now the thing is actually within much easier reach than something that's on your hip. You just reach down, touch your ankle, and you can draw the pistol, right? So for people whose professions have them seated a lot, or who you just have long commutes or anything like that, ankle holster is actually a great option. Downside of the ankle holster: it's going to be slower. Obviously, you've got a much longer distance from, you know, your waistline to your ankle versus, you know, just grabbing something out of your off your waistline. But worse than that is it immobilizes you during the draw. And this is the biggest downside of the ankle holster, right? So if I'm carrying in a belt holster and I'm being attacked and things like that, right? I can move laterally, I can back up anything I need to do and still reach for a belt holster, right? Whether that's in my appendix position, behind my hip, whatever, right? I have full freedom of movement, shoulder holster, anything like that. But to get to this guy, I got to plant my feet, right? I got to stop moving. And I've got to bend over, right? So now I'm presenting basically the back of my head to my opponent while I get the gun out. This would be an unfortunate situation if I'm being attacked by somebody with a bat or a ice pick or a knife or anything. I might get to my gun and find his ice pick buried in the back of my neck before I can get the gun out and finish the fight. So that's the biggest problem with ankle holsters. Again, every holster is a compromise. You know, if you're seated most of the time, the chances of you being able to move during the fight, well, they're pretty much eliminated anyway. But again, limitations of movement during the draw are the biggest disadvantage of ankle holsters. And really, you know, there are so many advantages to this. And under most circumstances, this is actually an awesome choice, especially if you're dressed up or things like that, and you have suit pants on or anything like that. This is actually a great option. Again, just bearing in mind that it is going to immobilize you when you draw.
One thing I've noticed, especially in my department, is that I think there was a phase, right, where ankle holsters were extremely popular because a lot of the old timers I notice will carry an ankle holster. Like that's almost how you identify an old timer. They all have ankle
Yeah,
holsters. You know?
okay. I didn't know that.
I don't know if that was like a phase a while ago, a couple of years ago.
I mean, I'm an old timer myself. So. But, you know, it's funny because this is our ankle glove. This is literally in our top 10 best sellers year in, year out, year in, year out. So maybe it's not the guys in your department and maybe it's not the young guys, but I'm telling you, somebody's buying these things. And we just keep coming out with fits for the newer guns. And, you know, these things, they sell. And we have a very good reputation in the industry in terms of comfort with this particular ankle holster. You know, it's a breathable neoprene. It's got genuine sheepskin padding. The thing's actually really, really comfortable, and we make it for a huge number of guns. And like I said, it has been in our top 10 for over 2 decades continually. So yeah, great holster, very popular holster, again, within those limitations, especially of movement. So you asked about shoulder holsters. Let's talk a little bit about that. So I talked about how Mr. Gallagher originally, this was the design he basically gave to that Chicago police officer. And the way this is designed is to ride horizontally. Now, let me see if I can step back enough for you to see. Yeah, horizontally right here. Okay. And then you've got 2 spare mags on the offside that are also carried horizontally. Now, this is actually extremely, extremely comfortable. When I was in Afghanistan, actually, I set up one of these for the M9, the issue pistol, and with 2 spare mags and a Surefire light. And that gave me probably what I consider the greatest advantage of a shoulder rig, especially a 2-sided one like this, is that kind of grab and go capability, right? Now, it is extremely comfortable. It's very concealable as long as you wear something that also covers the straps. But, you know, even for things like a bump in the night, and I know we're talking about concealment holsters, but, you know, I want to go check out the bump in the night, you know, so maybe I grab my body armor. This is very tiny body armor. It's my wife's body armor. But maybe I grab that, and then I can throw this on very, very quickly, as you just saw me put it on. And now I've got my pistol. I've got 2 spare mags. Got my armor, maybe. All I need is a flashlight, and I can go. I'm ready to go. I can defend my bedroom. I can go look for the source of that noise, whatever it is I'm going to do. And so I like that grab and go aspect of the shoulder rig, and it served me well in Afghanistan. I still occasionally carry with this design, and it is extremely comfortable. You know, you've got these straps distributing the weight. And we talked about weight distribution a little earlier in terms of the pancake holster, but that's distributing weight over this much of your belt, right? When you get to a shoulder rig, I mean, it's distributing weight over my entire upper body. So it's extremely comfortable. And I think comfort and the grab and go aspect are probably the 2 biggest advantages of the shoulder system. And they remain the flagship of our line, and they continue to sell. I mean, I mentioned how well the ankle glove sells. Shoulder rigs sell actually even better. I know they are not necessarily the favorite of trainers and things like that because of the crossbody draw. But in terms of a practical real life carry system, they actually work really great.
Thank you for, you know, explaining that really well. I appreciate that. So since you just showed us all these different holsters and they're all great looking holsters, I mean, do you have some newer products you'd like to talk about for this year?
I absolutely do. Let me show you a couple of things that are very cool. So this is one of our newest releases, and I'm sure, well, you look like you're a pretty young guy, Paul. You may not remember the first fanny pack craze for gun carry, but I assure you it existed. And these things are coming back. This is our Fast Tracks pack. This is a waist pack. It is a very, very modernized version of the original waist packs that were popular back in the 1990s for concealed carry. We use what we call comfort cloth on the back here, which is an adaptive performance mesh, TM. But it is extremely comfortable against the body. And the coolest thing about this, though, is that it's the speed of draw. Now, the previous generations of waist packs were pretty slow on the draw. You had to kind of unzip it and kind of dig around in the bag or kind of rip something open. But what we've worked out is just to simply unzip the thing and to, if you can see this, just to pull on this activation cord so that the gun pops out, enabling you to grab and execute a draw. This thing, when we introduced it at SHOT Show, I can't even tell you the response to this thing. But it's a great option, you know, even if you're not, you know, my age and I want to carry a fanny pack with my wallet in it. But no, if you're going to the gym, you're going for a run, you know, anything like that, this is actually a great carry option. Even if you're going on a hike, I've used this thing going on hikes, you know, here in Prescott, Arizona, which has some beautiful hiking trails, by the way. But yeah, so this has been an awesome, awesome success for us. And it's just taken off. I was absolutely shocked at the interest in this thing. So this is the Fast Tracks pack. We also, that adaptive performance mesh, the comfort cloth I mentioned, we are starting to use that quite a lot in our new products. This is our Quick Tuck Cloud. This is an inside the waistband holster. It's got a neutral cant or a vertical carry and a single belt clip forward of the gun, which makes it very, very easy and convenient to take on and off. But pressed up against your body, that comfort cloth, you got the sweat guard to protect you, and a Kydex holster pocket on the front, which gives you all the speed and ease of drawing that Kydex can offer you, along with the comfort, the padded comfort of this backing plate, it's just awesome. It is incredibly comfortable. So this one's been a great success for us. So we decided to do the same thing in our King Tuck line, which has been a very, very popular design for us for the past, I don't know, 10 or 12 years or so. But again, we get back to that comfort cloth, man. This thing is incredibly, incredibly easy to wear. Even with a large gun like this M&P, I barely even notice it's there. You know, Arizona's hot. You know, down in Phoenix, it's been 115, 118 degrees. But, you know, wearing this thing, it cannot get more comfortable for an inside the waistband holster. You've got, versus the Quick Tuck Cloud, the King Tuck Cloud has 2 belt clips, fore and aft. And what it will do, I know it is a wide holster, which distributes the weight like we talked about, and it will also conform to your body as you wear it. This is just an incredible, incredible holster. And again, that Kydex holster pocket gives you all the advantages in terms of speed and ease of draw, just like every Kydex holster does. So those are the 3 newest, hottest things: the Fast Tracks pack, which is the waist pack, the Quick Tuck Cloud, which is the IWB with the single clip, and this is our King Tuck Cloud, which is an IWB with the 2 fore and aft belt clips.
Fantastic.
How's that for a pitch?
Oh yeah, fantastic. No, you've definitely sold me, man. Like after talking to you, all I can think is like, I got to go and on the website and buy some more Galco holsters. That's what I got to do.
You're a smart man, Paul.
Yeah. Well, one of the last things I want to ask you though is what would you say to those guys out there who have this beautiful firearm that they've just purchased? It looks great. You know, they've definitely spent money on it, and now they've got it sitting in a really cheap, crummy holster, or a holster, or not even in a holster, you know? What would you say to those guys?
You know, that is a distressingly common situation, Paul. You know, you see a guy who'll go out and he'll spend money on, you know, maybe it's a SIG, maybe it's a higher end Kimber, maybe it's a Wilson or a Nighthawk or something like that. And he's got this horrible, you know, cheap nylon holster that he picked up at the gun show for $8 in the discount rack or something like that. That's frustrating to see, but, you know, everybody has their priorities. Everybody needs to make their choices. You know, my opinion is if you can afford a Wilson, you can certainly afford to spend, you know, $80 on a better holster to carry that thing in. Galco does have a line of high performance, but very reasonably priced holsters called our Carry Light line. And those start for a pocket holster just right around, I want to say about $30, and IWBs for $40-50. Again, high performance, but they're not going to break the bank. At least start there, I guess, is what I would tell somebody. And once you get a taste of a quality holster, it's very, very hard to go back to wearing a cheap piece of junk that you, like I said, you know, some piece of Chinese junk that you picked up at the gun, you know, in the discount rack at the gun shop for $8-9. There is definitely a difference. There's a difference in comfort. There's a difference in performance. Companies like Galco, we've been doing this for a very, very long time, half a century in Galco's case. So we know what goes into a good holster versus what to leave off that makes a holster not so good. And, you know, again, if you can afford a quality pistol, you can afford a quality holster, and you should invest in that, because look at why you're actually carrying that gun. If you're carrying the gun, you're doing it because you think you may need it to defend your life or the life of your loved ones. And is that really a place where you want to skimp out on your gear? I don't think it is. Spend the $80, $100, $120, whatever it is. It's still, you know, 10% of whatever you paid for your gun, or maybe less, depending on how nice that gun is and how expensive it is. But yeah, I mean, what's your life and the life of your loved ones? What's it worth?
Absolutely, absolutely. If you're gonna spend that money, you know, you got to have the right gear to go with it. You know, you gotta have the right gear to protect yourself. Galco definitely lives up to that. providing that quality holsters for everyone here.
Absolutely.
How can people find out more about Galco, and how can they, go online and get their holster?
The best place to do that is galcoholsters.com. If you're actually interested in the history of Galco, which I've gone into quite a bit here, but I personally have also written mountains and mountains of copy that appear on the website to go into some incredible detail on the history of the company, how to choose a holster. We have a holster guide there that will go into incredible depth about how to choose a holster. And you can also very conveniently order your holster there, and that's galcoholsters.com.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the show, doing this. I really appreciate it. Since I am a customer of Galco, it means a lot to actually have you come and talk to me and come on the show. So I really appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Yeah, Paul, thanks so much for having me. I really enjoyed it.